Welcome back to Telesplash Gaming, and today I'm talking about Konami's Castlevania Anniversary Collection. 8 games for 20 bucks, it's a great value, and I was fortunate enough to get hooked up with a copy from my buddies old Bob and Wesley at Gaming Off the Grid. And with that, I want to talk about these 8 games. I'm going to put them in order from the worst game to the best game. They're all charming in their own right, but like my buddy Connor McLeod says, there can be only one. So we're going to rank these from 8 to 1. Stick around. Every list has a beginning and an end, and unfortunately Castlevania Adventure lands at the number 8 spot on this list. For a portable game, it was pretty cool. It still had some rockin' tunes for a Game Boy, but the hardware just couldn't keep up with what it needed to be. Starting off, it was so much different because there was no weapon upgrades, there was no stairs, there was less levels, your whip went from being a wet noodle to being pretty powerful, but as soon as you got hit by an enemy, it would turn back off again. So it was like, you go from being really cool whip to a freaking wet noodle as soon as you get hit, so it was constantly changing, and the hardware for the Game Boy just couldn't keep up with what the developers wanted this game to do. It felt like you were literally going in slow motion, which made the game harder than it needed to be. Now, it did have a sweet name for a protagonist, Christopher Belmont, that's right, but other than that, this game's pretty weak as far as the Castlevania entries go, so it's going to land at number 8 today. Number 7 on the list was one that was actually kind of easy for me, but other people may have a different opinion, and that's Castlevania II Simon's Quest. It was the sequel to the freaking stellar original game, but it tried to do too much. Instead of taking what the original did and adding on, it took what the original did, rolled it up into a freaking donut hole, and said, we're gonna make this amazing, and it just didn't work out. They made it cryptic from the second you drop into the game. You're standing there looking around, you have a useless townsperson telling you what to do, and then you're freaking stuck. You can go left, you can go right, you can go farm hearts, you can do this. If you didn't have a guide or some sort of friend who'd played the game for hours, you were lost from the very beginning of the game. And to me, that's just not a fun gameplay mechanic. Like I said earlier, the townspeople are absolutely useless. They're supposed to be helping you, but they just hinder you. They give you all these weird messages that don't make any sense. And if you played the game with the Japanese translation, it might make more sense, but nobody did that. It had a day and a night system that in theory would have been cool, but it took so long to transfer from day to night and night to day that it just stopped the complete flow of gameplay. It still had rockin' tunes, and the actual gameplay itself was pretty fun, but there was just too many things going on, it was way too cryptic, and you just couldn't keep up. Now it did introduce multiple endings, which was really cool, but other than that, it just couldn't quite live up to what the first game did. So it lands at number 7 on the list today. Number 6 on the list goes to the sequel to Castlevania Adventure, and that's Castlevania II Belmont's Revenge. Now this was released for the Game Boy '91, but they figured out how to use the Game Boy's hardware to make this game run quite a bit better. It still suffered a little bit of the lag from the hardware limitations, but it was a massive improvement. No longer did you feel like you were walking at 12 frames a second. It actually bumped it up quite a bit, and you feel like when you're playing the game that it's not working against you because of the hardware, but because the game might actually be a little difficult. When that happens, you can tell this is a better game. There's 4 levels that can be played in any order, the password system's available, and the sub-weapons are back. So it really made huge improvements over the original Game Boy game, and that's why it lands at number 6. Next up is a game that was a Japanese exclusive on the Famicom until this collection came out, and that's Kid Dracula. Now Kid Dracula plays nothing like Castlevania, it's more akin to like a side-scrolling platformer like Mega Man. And everybody says that, but that's because you literally have a Dracula Mega Buster. You shoot it out, and you can hold it down, and you can charge your shot. So it is literally a Mega Man game with a Dracula skin. But you know what? It's fun. You go through levels, you collect power-ups, you get to get hearts to get more health. I mean, it's a pretty fun game. It's a big-time mix-up on the traditional Castlevania formula, but it's part of this collection, and it's pretty entertaining. And for those of us who never got a chance to play it, it's pretty cool to try out a new game. So Kid Dracula lands at number 5 on the list. Alright, we're getting to the second half of the list, and 4 through 1 was pretty tough, but Castlevania 1 is the 4th game. You know what? This is the OG, the granddaddy, the one who gave Dracula a fresh platform to start his reign of terror. This was as popular as they came back when it was released, and it still holds up today. Simon Belmont made the brave decision to enter Count Dracula's home and strangle him. With a whip, of course, and some power-ups. But, you know, that's beside the point. He inspired vampire hunters everywhere. The gothic theme, the rockin' soundtrack, power-ups, the iconic enemies, it all started here. This game really did set the stage for what Castlevania's potential could be. Number 3 on the list goes to Castlevania III Dracula's Curse. Gone are the day and the night system number 2, the cryptic messages, the useless townspeople. It brings back the rockin' soundtrack, the power-ups, the whip, and everything that was good about the original, and it's just made better, a little better graphics. The gameplay is really similar, and you get to play as a new member of the Belmont clan, Trevor. Now, this is the 3rd game in the series, but it's actually the prequel to the original. So now we're getting into that weird timeline crap where it's the 3rd game, but it's actually the 1st game in the timeline, but it doesn't matter. The point is, this is one of the greatest NES games of all time, and if you had one Castlevania game to play on the NES, this is definitely it. No more useless townspeople, you actually have real allies that can help you in your journey, and you have branching paths to lead to multiple endings, so this is definitely one of the best Castlevanias, but it only makes number 3 on the list today. The next 2 games could have flip-flopped, depending on which system you owned, but for me, I'm going with number 2 as Castlevania Bloodlines for the Genesis. Now, Sega fans had to wait quite a bit for their very first Castlevania experience, but what they got was freaking rad. You got 2 playable characters, John and Eric. They team up to fight Dracula's niece as she tries to bring her uncle back for some freaking demented family reunion that she's got planned. This game made enough changes to warrant a playthrough for any Castlevania fan, unless you're like me and didn't have a Genesis at the time and got to play it finally on this collection. John and Eric both play different. John uses a whip like your traditional Belmont family, and Eric has higher jumping and uses a spear. They had some really cool effects that the Genesis used, and it also included a little bit more gore than traditional Castlevania fans were used to. Castlevania Bloodlines is one that I'm going to be sinking my teeth into over the next few weeks because I never got to play it. But it only landed at number 2 today. Number 1 game on the list. Can I get a hell yeah? It's Castlevania IV for the Super Nintendo. It's one of my fondest SNES memories. I played it at my uncle's house, so that's probably part of the reason that it landed at number 1. But the other reason it landed at number 1 is because it's freaking awesome. I mean, no longer is the whip just a little freaking whip that goes across the screen, but you can swing that thing around in all directions. You can go up, you can go down, you can go diagonal, you can dangle it over an enemy and whack them in the head with it. You can use it to swing around the levels like Tarzan, which at that point in time blew the fuzz off my peanut brain as a kid. The password system worked, the power-ups were amazing, the enemies were freaking awesome, the soundtrack again just kept rocking with the Super Nintendo. It was literally the best Super Nintendo had to offer, one of the best Castlevania games, and everything about it was just rad. So if you've never played Castlevania IV, this is definitely the best game, I believe, on this collection, and you have to check it out. So that's it. All 8 games on the Castlevania Anniversary Collection ranked from the worst to the best. What's your favorite Castlevania game on this list? Did I put your favorite game at number 3? Did I put the worst game at number 1? What do you guys think? And what's your favorite Castlevania game of all time? With that being said, thanks so much for tuning in. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, putting out videos weekly, and most importantly, keep trolling, keep rolling.